in a very small rural village with maybe 10 to 15 houses. It was Christmas Day. In the afternoon, my partner and I decided to go for a little digestive walk as we were really stuffed from all the food. It was about 5 p.m., and since it was winter, it was already pretty dark when we left, so we brought a flashlight with us. I also took my camera as I love taking pictures of nature at night. We decided to walk on a little country road towards a nearby forest. In the middle of the trail, you have to walk through a small bit of forest. It's rather dark, and the trees are very high and quite dense. When we entered, I saw our flashlights reflecting on something and recognized a car. The car was parked on the side of the trail, close to the trees. This struck me as odd, as cars are not allowed to drive there, and the path is very narrow and hidden, so I was a bit cautious. My partner pointed the light inside of the car and it seemed to be empty. I also noticed the windows were frozen, so it must have been parked there for a while. A bit in front of the car, I spotted a tree with an intriguing structure. I asked my partner to aim the flashlight towards it so I could focus better and take a picture of it. After I took a few photos, my partner told me, there's someone standing behind us in the middle of the road. They're looking right at us. Nobody was following us the whole way. I kept looking around and behind us occasionally, because at this time in the evening and close to the border of the forest, there are boars sometimes, and it's mating season, so they are more aggressive than usual. But sure enough, there was a man standing behind us, staying just out of the flashlight's reach. He wasn't saying anything, just standing there and facing us. At first, I thought he might be startled, as it may seem a bit weird if someone's just taking photos around your car, even though it wasn't even legal to drive on that path. I decided to get up and confront him from a distance, explaining to him that I was just taking photos of that tree. He didn't react and still just stood there. I then went on to ask him if he needed some light, and he replied that this wasn't necessary. It was odd, but I was still calm, sure about there being a normal explanation for his behavior. Nonetheless, my partner and I decided to just get the fuck out and follow the path leading to the next village. It was maybe 5 to 7 minutes until we reached it. I remembered enough of his license plate and looked it up. Assuming that it was his, it turns out that he was from a city about 6 hours away from our village. Mind you, the country I live in is in a very strict lockdown right now, so you're only allowed to travel if you have urgent reasons. After my partner and I reached the first lantern of the next village, we looked back and observed the car driving a bit out of the forest, turning around and going back inside. I was able to see that he was parked there again and turned the lights off. He didn't leave the forest. We then went home on a much longer way than initially intended, as I didn't want to go back there for obvious reasons. Our flashlight battery died on the way, and my phone battery was low, so I didn't want to call the police back then, but I called them as soon as I arrived home and gave them all the details. It only occurred to me as really strange when I thought about the frozen windows and that he could have been trailing behind us, plus him having no light and not responding. He did seem to be sneaking up on us when I sat down to take the photo. I think I was very lucky to have my partner, the camera, and the bright light with me. I don't even want to imagine what could have happened if I was alone. He must have hidden behind the trees close to the car and forest entrance. Update. We went back and found tape marking on one of the trees, a very small hideout, as well as some cut off part of a backpack. The baby snatchers. I suffered from childhood trauma, so it made me a little more cautious than others. I often would take my kids with me shopping and to run errands. My daughter Sam was my youngest. She has dark black hair, big brown eyes, and the sweetest face. Anytime I had Sam with me, people would tell me how cute she was and that she was just so beautiful. I usually took the compliment as just that, said thank you, and went on my way. But this one particular time, I had taken the kids to the mall to play at the kid play area. We had been there all day as it was around Christmas time, and I was doing some holiday shopping as well. The whole day I kept running into this man and woman. At first I didn't think anything of it, as I was used to people telling me how beautiful Sam was, but this couple seemed to keep showing up throughout the day, always complimenting Sam. I was getting more and more creeped out because I had seen them probably 5 or 6 times that day already. I finally decide we're going home because my danger radar is screaming at this point. So I gather my bags, my kids, and head to the door. As we get close to the door, the woman pops out of one of the stores and offers to help me with my things and the kids. She looks at me and smiles before saying, "Your hands are full, and you know what they say, it takes a village." I politely decline the offer as we are still walking, and then her husband comes up behind me and tries reaching for Sam, saying, "Just let us help you." I immediately start screaming, "Get away from me," as loud as I can, which gets the attention of other shoppers and the security guard. I tell him what's going on, and he offers to walk me to my car while his partner speaks to the couple. About a month later, I'm making dinner and watching the news, and that same couple shows up on there for trying to snatch a lady's baby. I was horrified and relieved at the same time. Followed for miles by a lady who insisted on giving me a ride home. It must have been during our Christmas break. An old friend of mine was having a party. There was going to be alcohol and weed. Of course I was going to be there. This friend lived in a town a few miles away. I was dropped off there with some other peeps and expected to be staying there the whole night. But later on, I decided I really just wanted to sleep in my own bed. At this point, it was really late in the night. Everyone else was already pretty fucked up. I knew the only way for me to get home would be to walk. I knew at the time it would be a long walk, probably about 3 miles from his house back to mine, but I was pretty buzzed and pretty motivated to be somewhere comfortable. I had my Zune on me, so I decided to go for it. It was also December in central New York, so there was a pretty steady snowstorm bearing down that night. One important thing you should know is that when I was in high school, I was a big dude, about 5'11" and also about 330 pounds at the time, so obviously pretty hefty. I also always wore basketball shorts no matter what the weather was like. Part of that was just being fat and hating jeans, and the other part is the fact that I've just always seemed to have a really high tolerance for cold weather. It just doesn't bother me that much. So I get about a mile into my walk. It must be nearly like 3 in the morning when this woman in maybe her early 30s, driving by herself, pulls up alongside me. She claims to be concerned, which, honestly, I can understand. I seriously must have looked kind of crazy. And she insists over and over and over again that I let her give me a ride. I don't want a ride. I'm fine in the cold and I have my music and really was kind of enjoying the walk. I tell her I'm okay, but she absolutely refuses to take no for an answer. That's really the first thing that made me uncomfortable in that situation. Even being young at the time, I understood how I looked as a big guy with a big beard and a rough demeanor, walking down a county highway in the middle of the night. I honestly would have looked exactly like the sort of person you're taught to avoid, but she would not leave me alone. The way she kept insisting I get in her car just felt menacing in a way. The problem for me though was that even on this 40-mile-per-hour speed limit stretch, this woman decided that she would just follow me, following just slightly behind me at my walking pace. Ever so often she would pull up next to me and again offer a ride home. I finally get fed up with it and decide I'll just take the ride. But as I'm walking towards the car, she tells me that I can't sit in the front. I need to go in the back seat. Immediately, I determine that's just bizarre. If this woman is so concerned and so willing to pick up a stranger as strange as me in the middle of the night, what makes me sitting in the back seat so essential? I have visions of child safety locks and being inexplicably kidnapped by a woman I outweigh by probably 200 pounds, so I decide I won't be getting in the car after all. She doesn't seem entirely happy with that. Actually, she calls the police. Some cops show up and she tries to convince them that I need a ride home. Cops determine that I'm old enough to make that call on my own, and also probably realize what a bizarre thing that is for a total stranger to be demanding, so he leaves me to it. Funnily, he himself didn't even offer me a ride. I would have taken one from him in a heartbeat just to be away from this lady. Nothing else really happened except for the fact that this woman followed me for almost 40 minutes on my walk home. By the time I was close to my house, I was so freaked out by her that I cut through a few yards and actually went to my friend's place where there was a sort of open door policy to just wait for another hour or so until I was sure she was gone. There's just a lot about this experience that doesn't make sense to me. Why only the backseat? Why get the cops to try to force me to accept her offer? None of that seems normal to me, and in that moment, it was truly terrifying. Christmas Eve dinner at Burger King. Sounds innocent enough, right? Not my first choice, but I had to work late, and being Christmas Eve, it looked to be my best choice. I finished working at 9 and had some coupons for Burger King, so that made my decision for me. When I got there, I noticed it was still open, but the dining room was shut down. The only way I could get something is if I went through the drive-thru. Only problem is, I don't have a car. I tried to walk up to the drive-thru and place my order, but the compassionate young lady working the drive-thru wasn't having it. She told me if I didn't have a vehicle, I couldn't use the drive-thru. That's fair, but unfortunately, being hungry, I became rather aggravated and began saying things that I'm not proud of. At this moment, an older woman wearing shining armor appeared on the scene and offered me to jump in her car and order my food. At first, I turned her down, not wanting to be a bother, but after some convincing, I decided to accept her help. After ordering my food, it took so long to get it that I missed my bus. The nice woman offered me a ride home, but I felt kind of off-put by the offer, so I declined. She was persistent, but at the same time, nice and convinced me to take her offer. Mind you, I'm a 250-pound, 30-some-year-old man, so I really didn't feel threatened by a 50-some-year-old woman. If the circumstances were different, I wouldn't have taken the ride. After I told her where I lived, we proceeded home. About 5 minutes from my house, she made a wrong turn. I explained that I lived the other way and that we needed to turn around, or just let me out here and I'll walk the rest of the way. It was then that the woman's demeanor changed, and she told me that she could not let me spend Christmas Eve alone and that she was taking me to her house. I told her that I needed to get home immediately to let my dog out and that I would be fine. The woman then tried to entice me with liquor and other stuff at her place, but since I'm in recovery, I told her I wasn't interested. She refused to turn around or let me out and started to drive strangely, not stopping at any stop signs. My mind was racing and I began to sweat. I knew that I could physically overpower her, but what awaited me at her house? I also felt bad about hurting her after all her kindness, but I had to get away before her house, and I didn't know where that was, so I didn't know how much time I had left. Then, all of a sudden, the car in front of us was stopped at a stop sign. Because of this, she had to slow down, and I took this chance to jump out of the car while it was still moving, and I took off running. As I was running away, she stopped and got out of her car, trying to convince me to get back inside with her. That just wasn't an option. I don't know what her motives were or who she was, but I knew I wasn't willing to risk my life over it. I ran all the way home and made sure I wasn't being followed. I really feel this nice woman had a nefarious purpose and that I just so happened to be the perfect victim of opportunity.